Hello, and welcome to Holyrude Ungagged, the Billy Gilmore of political podcasts. Another busy week. I'm starting to realise that we don't really have any other kind of week when it comes to politics in Scotland and the UK. Dominic Cummings was spilling more Tory secrets at the start of the week, saying a lot of unkind things to Boris. And as much as we don't like Dominic Cummings too much, it's always nice to hear bad things about other Tories. The far-right GB News network started off to a rocky start, which is quite a kind way of saying they look to be an absolute shambles. And we had the Cabinet Office were ordered to release secret polling data about the Union. This was the result of a 2-year court battle with SNP Member of Parliament Tommy Shepherd. And then we had a shock by-election result down south in Chesham and Amersham. This was as big a shock a result as you could get when you look at the numbers. So we'll be talking about that. And we'll just be talking about the sort of latest with COVID and where we are and where we're look as if we're heading to with it. If you've got anything else that you would like us to talk about in the Holyrude Ungagged podcast, you can tweet us at _ungagged, hashtag Holyrude Ungagged. Or you can send us an email at ungaggedleft@gmail.com and just put Holyrude Ungagged in the subject line. I'm your host today, David McClement, transmitting from the Blantyre Free State, and I'll be joined with my usual gruesome twosome, Brian Finlay, the prodigal son of Holyrood podcast, and Deborah Torrance, our own digital Michelangelo. So with all that said, let's get ungagged.
And it was nice to hear you smile. Dream a dream 'cause you'll never die. The stars will never overtake the sky. Life has its turns and it takes a while. And it was nice to hear you smile. Nice to hear you smile.
Hi guys, how you doing? Another fun podcast ahead of us. Did you all watch the football on Friday?
Of course.
I didn't, but I was following everything on social media because I was too anxious to watch it. And that's actually genuine because, I mean, I don't watch football anyway, but I was like, well, me and Glenn are really getting into the British Zombie, so I thought I'm going to watch that instead because it's a bit lighter. And it just sounds so stereotypical. And then I just kept checking the scores were going along, but we live opposite a pub, which they were obviously watching it because it was a bit leery. And I was like, well, we'll know anyway if somebody scores. And but I don't like watching football anyway because I don't really fully understand it. But I was like, do you know what? I'll just watch Zombie and then I can just keep checking the scores. And then when it got to like 10, 15 minutes to go, I was like just checking it every minute. And I was like, I think we've made it. I think we've made it through. So I was pretty chuffed about that.
Did you watch it, David?
I did. It was rather tense. I watched it with the kids who were kind of half interested. Like, they sort of flitted in and out. Molly was trying to be fair, like because she's getting we're friends with an English family, and she was like, no, she likes England as well, so she didn't mind 2-1. So I kind of let that go. But if she keeps that up in a couple of years, I'll not have a word with her. And Megan just kept humouring me by occasionally shouting for Celtic, so she didn't quite get it either. But it was stressful, but they played well and they done us all proud. We beat them 0-0 each.
Exactly. It was the greatest victorious draw we've ever had. I watched it with real football fans, seeing as you're always slagging me for not being a real football fan. And they were cheering at shies and corners, and I was a wee bit confused, but then but it was great. It was really, I didn't think England showed up. They didn't look like the winners of whatever cup we're playing for. I thought we done really well. I thought we looked good, and come on, McGinn to them. Yes, Banky.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff for like some of the pundits, which you always get, that they just did not expect Scotland to have a chance. They just thought they'd turn up, and I wonder if that transferred to the players, if they just thought we just turn up, kick it about and cruise to a win, and it did not turn out like that for them.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, for me being on this podcast, whoever's listening, you have not come here for the football analysis of the century, but some nice anecdotes about how we watch the football. But a good positive thing too was my pal, I've got friends that used to live down in England, down in London way, and I was texting one of my friends because they always watch football, and she was saying that our son was supporting England and Scotland because I think his great granddad's from Scotland, but he said that he likes Scotland just as much as England. And I thought that was quite cute.
Yeah, there was a funny story I heard. Stephen O'Donnell that was playing for Scotland. He plays for Motherwell. He's not a sort of glamorous type player. And at one point, it was up against Jack Grealish, who plays for Aston Villa, who's quite a kind of trendy, sort of David Beckham wannabe, really. And John McGinn plays alongside him. So he had a word with Stephen O'Donnell and said, just keep whispering in his ear. You'll get under his skin. But he says, and that's not an uncommon thing in football and other sports. But he says, don't be negative. Don't insult him. Give him compliments. It will really confuse him. So Steve O'Donnell said he was whispering, going up to him when they were marking and saying, "Where'd you get that haircut? It's lovely. I really like it." And I was telling him, "You've got lovely calves." Jack Grealish was really put off because he was like, "What is this guy all about?"
I like it. The nice tactic could be nice.
But,
Hashtag be nice.
That was it in microcosm. Stephen O'Donnell and Motherwell up against the playboy of English football, and the kind of hard-working Scottish player rolled his sleeves up and get stuck in and won is the day. So well done, Scotland.
Yeah, and when's the next game? Tuesday?
So if we win that, we're almost guaranteed going through. So it'd be a very Scottish thing to win it and somehow go out in goal difference, because we've done that many times over the decades.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd also be a very Scottish thing for us to expect that and them go out and absolutely get pumped. Be 2-0 down after 10 minutes and then just totally kill all the sort of joy that we were all feeling. And by the time this podcast comes out, all the listeners will know which one it is. So,
like, seeing as this is not a football podcast, should we talk about some politics?
And talk about what we know. Yeah.
So first up, Dominic Cummings spilling Tory secrets again. It was I think it was a 7,000 word sort of blog post they shared, including screen captures of WhatsApp conversations. I mean, talk about keeping the receipts. So one of the big things was he had WhatsApp messages from Boris Johnson referring to Matt Hancock as being fucking hopeless, and they discussed taking off the PPE responsibilities and giving them to Michael Gove.
Is that the most truthful thing Boris Johnson's ever said?
It might be.
The only thing.
Yeah, so Matt Hancock, let's start there.
Yeah, it's quite explosive, wasn't it? And very detailed. I had a good read through some of the bits and pieces that was saying, obviously, the media's really kind of picked up and ran with the whole Matt Hancock being fucking useless. It's been put to a few people, which is really, really funny in interviews. I think it was the head of NHS England and was being interviewed by the ITV, and it was like one of these sort of bank interviews that they could use in different segments. And there's a video that they've shared it on Twitter, and it's like a 90-second video where they've asked him about this accusation, and he's about like very much at the start, we don't really comment on too much political, kind of stepping back from it, but you can tell by his face that he's really quite amused. And they actually have come out and said to him, "Do you think Matt Hancock is useless?" And he just essentially says yes without saying yes, which is the best thing I think I've ever seen from interviews on the mainstream media. Yeah, I mean, Dominic Cummings himself is obviously on a bit of a warpath at the moment. I mean, I think he's doing his Q&A session. Is that today at some point?
Yeah,
which is quite
ask
nice.
me anything.
Subscribers only. So he's trying to coin it in.
No doubt. So he's, this is almost like the sort of political equivalent of like a celebrity doing an Instagram live, like, just saying, ask me anything, but you have to pay a subscription or you need to register in some way. So that's very, very Dominic Cummings politics there, isn't it? Very free market, very much the libertarian, be open to anyone if you can pay or if you can be bothered to register.
With all this going on, it'd be quite easy to start seeing Dominic Cummings as a good guy, but we need to keep sort of reminding ourselves that he is absolutely not. And all this stuff that he's now divulging, he is as responsible as anybody because he helped put them there.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's been very vocal now, but he was not vocal at all when he was in a position to do anything about it. If he had put the brakes on, before the lockdown last March and said, I can't be part of this, this is what my concerns are, I'm walking away, perhaps some people could have a bit of respect for him, but he was just as culpable as all these people that he's calling fucking useless.
We keep talking about Dominic Cummings, and I think that's exactly what he wants. He wants to stay relevant in the sphere of politics, and undoubtedly he'll keep releasing these wee things. And the gross thing about the Ask Me Anything, and then you're talking about Insta Live, and then pay to participate. He's got me thinking about Dominic Cummings doing a OnlyFans. Yeah.
We'll live with that image.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything he could release that would surprise me now. Do you? Is there anything?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's shocking it is to hear somebody come out with all this stuff that was inside. It's not anything that we didn't really think. I mean, is MD shocked that Matt Hancock's hopeless? He certainly seemed it.
Exactly. Is it a lie?
I mean, you see him when he gets interviewed, and I don't know if it's because he's went to some kind of media training, they've tried to teach him this, but he stares at people and leers at them like he's a serial killer.
Maybe
genuinely disturbing.
Maybe that's just his face.
Yeah, there's a real delayed reaction to a lot of things when he's been asked questions, and you can tell it's not like, we're having a discussion saying, oh, you want to think about an answer and respond. It's like, what have I been told to say? What's the best way to present this piece of information? And what he tends to do is repeat the same the buzzwords or the buzz lines that he's obviously been given, even when it doesn't fit what is being asked. So, the vaccine rollout is a prime example. We'll constantly go back to the vaccine rollout when they're actually talking about something to do with, Delta variant, for example, or travel restrictions. And just it's almost like as if the needle's jumped on the record and it's gone back to the start of what he's been told to say. So yeah, I definitely think he is hopeless, useless, whatever word. A variety of words would definitely suit Matt Hancock. And what you were saying too about whatever Cummings has got to say, nobody's surprised anymore. And that in itself is a real shift of political opinion, coverage, whatever you want to call it, where people are no longer surprised by these things. And that in itself is worrying.
And it shows the weakness of Boris Johnson as well. Matt Hancock is not exactly new to the job. He's been in it for a good while now. He's apparently failed multiple times. Everybody in power thinks he's hopeless. Doesn't seem to have any respect for him. Why has he not been sacked? Or at the very least shuffled sideways? I mean, politics isn't a meritocracy. We know this.
Mm-hmm.
People get jobs because they support the right positions, which is, we've seen that with Brexit. Brexiteers getting jobs everywhere, no matter how cut out for it or how competent they are. Or people get jobs because they get certain influence and within their political party. So it's no surprise that sometimes you'll get ministers that aren't the best. But this is the health secretary, which is pretty important. But during a pandemic, you're leaving somebody in the job that you think is hopeless. You're guaranteeing people will die because of that, a non-decision. And we've heard that about Boris Johnson, that he doesn't like making decisions, so he waits and waits until a situation deteriorates to the point that it's an easy decision.
I think that he's hanging on to Matt Hancock so he can be dismissed at another time. We've got inquiries that will be coming up. We've got, there might be other things that come to the forefront where there might be evidence that might come from whether it be Sage or whether it be from anyone else. And then he can sack him, and then he will be the fall guy for all of the bad decisions that have been made. He's the health secretary, so therefore he is, one of the ones that's most responsible for the pandemic response. So he would be an easy one to sack at a more convenient time. I think that's definitely something that will happen at some point, but I don't think it's convenient to happen right now.
No, I'd rather have an incompetent health secretary during a global pandemic
than
lose a human shield.
Exactly.
Basically, yeah.
It's going to be the scapegoat.
Yeah, and back to Cummings as well, that all of these drip that we seem to be getting, and I've been following all these different revelations quite closely, and there's certain individuals that he hasn't criticised. And I think that this is the most important thing that we need to bear in mind. So Rishi Sunak seems to be getting away with, he's not been held accountable for any of his decisions, or he hasn't been brought up or sort of said, oh, you're responsible for this, you're useless, you're X, Y, and Z. And Michael Gove is another one. So, and even though Michael Gove has been ruled to acted out with the law when given out, contracts to Dominic Cummings' organisation, yet he's not been criticised. So I think that's really, really quite important to perhaps where Dominic Cummings would like to see in future posts. Yeah. So Michael Gove as Prime Minister, which makes me feel a bit.
Nauseous.
That's a really, really good word, a good noise to describe how I feel. And then perhaps Rishi Sunak as maintaining his position as Chancellor. So
has he slagged Priti Patel?
Only a little bit. Maybe because he's petrified of her, because I think everybody is petrified of Priti Patel. This is another example of a minister in place, so Home Secretary, or a secretary that's in place, who's been, accused of bullying, who was sacked under Theresa May for having meetings with Israeli ministers without permission, and is now responsible for the Home Office.
Yeah.
So, it's not just incompetent. These are senior posts, Health Secretary and Home Secretary, who've both got real past. There's evidence that they are not fit to be in that position, yet here they are.
Yeah, imagine a member of a Corbyn government was found to be having secret meetings with a foreign government. The Daily Mail and the Sun would be melting with rage.
Maybe some revelations are still to come. Maybe Dominic Cummings saving it for a book or something. I don't know.
Well, it's also like if he is looking to get back in with a future Michael Gove sort of premiership, then he'll keep his powder dry, and some of them he can keep firing and Johnson and Hancock, and it's also a bit of a threat then, because the likes of Rishi Sunak, he'll definitely have something on him. I mean, look at the Eat Out to Help Out thing was a disaster and directly contributed to people's deaths. Yet there's not been a bit of criticism about that. I'm sure he could if he wanted to, and I'm sure Rishi Sunak knows that Dominic Cummings could say a lot about that. So he's got to sort of be not saying something that gives him a wee bit of sort of influence and power, because it allows him to keep something in his back pocket for later.
Which is, that says a lot about his personality, and I think that that type of personality has already been sort of, well, I certainly picked up on it very early on, that he was clearly quite conniving and very good at keeping everything to hand to where it comes to dishing out the dirt on individual people. And you're right to say we Eat Out to Help Out has not been criticised even during his lengthy evidence given to the select committee. It was sort of avoided because Eat Out to Help Out was just such a looking back, it's just crazy. And of course, restaurants and stuff in themselves, from the evidence that's available to us, the actual transmission in hospitality itself is quite low. However, I think one of the major things that would have contributed to that is to people thinking this is over. So it wasn't actually the people catching COVID or spreading it in restaurants and in pubs and things like that, because it was food only that this was aimed for, so more so in restaurants. But I think it was more the sort of attitude that actually when it was August last year, it did kind of feel like, oh, this is over. Thank goodness we can all go back to normal. The government's telling us to go out for meals. We're getting discounts. It's fantastic. It's great. And, we're saving the hospitality sector, when actually we should be thinking more about the frontline service workers that are on 0-hour contracts, poverty pay, really, really bad working conditions to save the hospitality sector. And I think it was more just that sort of attitude of this is over. And I think that had a huge psychological shift for people, and to just sort of go about their normal lives and ultimately start bringing about that disastrous wave that started picking up at the end of August and into September.
And I remember at the time thinking that if they were really wanting to help hospitality, they could have just gave the businesses the money directly rather than subsidising people's to go out, and encouraging people to mix. And here we are now, nearly a year later, and we're still stuck in it.
Yeah, it's about, I think, a level of ineptitude and corruption, like we always keep talking about. But why did they decide that, like you said, why not just give the restaurants the money directly? Why do this weird subsidy thing? And just to bring it back to Tory corruption and ineptitude, which we haven't really got a jingle for yet.
We need a jingle. Ineptitude is a great word for it as well.
The Test and Protect app. There's another huge failed experiment of whatever was going on there. Oh, Ryan brings out his notebook.
Yeah, I've got a nice printout here. Yeah,
It was
so
37 billion, was it?
yes.
And who was in charge of that? Was that the Dido Harding woman that just
recently
said about the NHS, we don't want your immigrants? What is wrong with the government?
She's also applied to be head of the NHS in England.
Exactly. It's like,
which is mind-boggling.
Has Cummings slagged Harding?
Not that I've seen. So there you go. But yeah, Baroness Harding, remember? So this is really, really important. So she's a
Would
Tory.
you want to be disrespectful?
Yes.
Well, it's more, that to call her an official title, but bear in mind that she's an unelected member of the House of Lords, who oversaw the Test and Protect app, which was at best a complete disaster and cost all that money that it cost. She's now applying to be the head of NHS England, which is the Europe's biggest employer, and has a budget of more than £150 billion. But do not worry about her political affiliations, because she said if she's successful in becoming the head of NHS England, that she will take leave from her position as an unelected Lord, which I thought was really, really nice of her.
Yeah, kind.
But she will also give up her membership for the Conservative Party. And I think that is completely how you divorce yourself from the politics, because if you're not a member of a party, you can't lobby. I mean, you definitely are not going to be sticking up for them, are you? You're not going to be lobbying them. You're not going to use those connections and everything that the Conservative Party has been criticised for since the start of this pandemic by, having access, cash for access, if you want to use buzzwords. That's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
And somebody should say it's not a political sort of bias that we're worried about. We're worried about the fact that either she's so incompetent she cost 37 billion, or she's so corrupt she helped to funnel 37 billion to God knows where. I mean, I just keep saying the number, 37 billion.
I know, it's a lot of money
for something that just didn't work.
And you think how angry people got because a Tory MP spent I don't even know how much, but compared to this, an insignificant amount of money in getting their moat cleaned or getting a duck pond.
Which still sounds ridiculous.
People were furious about that, and rightly so. But why are we not far more furious that instead of like a few £1,000, somebody cost us 37 billion? And I'm saying the number again and again because I just can't get my head around it.
It is crazy. And this printout that I've got here is the comment section from the Times newspaper, right? So bear in mind these types of people that will be registered with the Times and people that are willing to comment, just from past experience, they're not very lefty. They don't really like trade unions. They tend not to be very great about public services in general. They are not happy. The top comment on this one: God spare us from her incompetence. End NHS resilience on serial failure. Yeah, nobody's happy. So that's that's people who read the Times. So there you go. It just shows you that I don't think a lot of people are going to be happy about this appointment, whether you're on,
no matter whether
right
you're
on the left.
No matter whether you're on the left and the right, nobody likes getting robbed.
Exactly. So there you are.
And what does the Test and Protect? What did that really entail anyway? Surely it involved hiring a lot of people and getting a lot of phone lines put in.
It was a spreadsheet. It was a spreadsheet, and they put it. What was it? An app? They had an app.
Mm-hmm.
Aye, it was a spreadsheet. That's what the Test and Protect was, wasn't it?
No one know very much about these things. If I was told to set up a sort of system for tracking and making sure people quarantined, I would think, well, you just need a lot of people to make phone calls. I don't understand how you could massively overspend like that.
37.5, was it? Billion.
37 billion.
Where's 500 million pounds here or there? Come on.
And I think too, there's already people in place that can do things like track and trace.
Yep.
If I think now if you use like sexual health, they use a lot of that for people for tracing, sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, and all these types of things. It already exists. And if you look at countries like South Korea, Singapore, all these countries that have dealt with pandemics before, they already have a robust track, trace, and isolate system, which you could literally just cut and paste and then adapt it to fit with us. But that 37 billion, it just seems like you're just making up numbers when you're saying that. That 37 billion could actually have been put to pay people to isolate, and we probably wouldn't be in the position we're in now, because one of the, there's a lot of leaky sieves that have happened that have caused the disease to continually spread throughout the UK. And one of the major ones was people not self-isolating, but they should have, because they couldn't afford to, or they were at risk of losing their job. So, I think that a big chunk of that 37 billion could have been applied to that, and it probably would have been a hell of a lot more successful than the useless test and trace, which, was a disaster.
Yeah, bearing in mind that even after they spent the 37 billion, it didn't work. We didn't have a good system.
Exactly.
You think even if we massively overpaid, it cost us this a lot of money. But if at least done the job in the end, you would go, right, well, okay, at least we got the job. We got the job done. But they didn't. We spent all this money and we get a hopeless system compared to a lot of foreign countries like the South Korea and Singapore that you mentioned. I mean, I remember right at the start of the pandemic, NHS Lanarkshire said that they'd set up some kind of track and trace team where they were saying, like, if you've got symptoms, contact us and we'll send somebody around to test you. And then that get disbanded, which I presume it's because they kind of done that off their own back, and then get word from above that no, that's not how we're supposed to be doing things. And they gave up on testing in the early days for a while.
They did,
which
yeah.
I couldn't get, because surely, even though at that point they didn't have treatments or vaccines, at least you need to know where the virus is, so you can track the outbreak and say, well, it's really bad here, this is a place we need to try and quarantine. But if you're not testing people, we had no idea how extensive the virus had spread in the early days. We still don't know how much it spread in the early days.
I think it was up until sort of April time, wasn't it, that they were the end of April when they started doing more extensive testing, and testing was available to anyone who had symptoms. Even at that point, you couldn't get a test if you didn't have symptoms. So, we've no idea, the asymptomatic transmission, how big that was in the early days. Because there was this is all governments in the UK sort of shifted away from the priority of testing, which was against the World Health Organization's advice. But I'm really mindful that I'm not an expert in this, but for me, just the example of Lanarkshire that you're saying, that I think health boards and local health boards and these types of things would have been much, much more reactive to local areas' needs if they were just given the resources, the money, the time, and the autonomy to deliver these things. Of course, there needs to be a centralised approach and a way of communicating, between different health boards and things. But to me, it just makes much more sense to have test and trace type systems working locally.
Yeah, and we're still living with those failures for the sort of early days of the pandemic.
Yeah. Even it was at Sage Advisory Group said that Dido Hardin's £37 billion operation had a minimal impact on transmission. So there you go.
Yeah,
Seems a bargain.
Absolute
depressing.
bargain.
Since we're talking about COVID, anyway, how are you feeling at the moment? Like, there's talk of a really depressing talk of a potential third wave.
It's stressful. As somebody who was shielding and living with an elderly person, and it's so frustrating. We've abided by all these rules for so long. We can almost see the finish line. I just got my second jab. We're full jab. What am I? Jag. We're all jagged up in this house, double dosed. And it's frustrating to see this, is it called the Delta variant? Is that the right term? That's causing havoc, and Manchester, that's in a bad way. Dundee, they're having a hard time. I think we've got Glasgow's levelled out a bit more. It's just, I think we've got to all get vaccinated. We've got to do it. We've got to keep our head through the nut. Aye.
We're getting there with the vaccinations at least. But the terrifying thing is, like, when it's still kind of running out of control in certain parts of the world, there's then the chance that it will mutate again. And the nightmare scenario is that we get everybody vaccinated and then it mutates in a way that stops the vaccine from working. And then it literally is, we're back to square one.
Brazil's bad just now, isn't it? Under Bolsonaro, there's like, they've got 1 million people near enough that's got the virus. And he went with the herd immunity tactic.
He went with the sort of Trump sort of approach to deny it existed and all kinds of ludicrous things.
Scary.
One of the things I just keep finding myself thinking about is, with a potential another lockdown, and I just keep thinking, what is the point now? Not just in this country, but in countries all around the world, the political systems have been shown to just not be capable of dealing with it, and it's just like, so do we want to lock down again? I have no confidence in the UK government's ability to actually then deal with the outbreak, and at best, I feel as if we'll go into lockdown for another 3-4 months, whatever, we'll start coming out, and then something else will happen, and again, they'll balls it up, and we'll just end up back in this situation again. It's so depressing.
Yeah, all things remaining the same. So say there isn't another variant that pops up that is, particularly problematic with the vaccines and the way things are going. I can't see that us going into another full lockdown again. The way things were anyway, I can't really see that happening. I think that if we do need to get more restrictions in place, which I can see happening at some point, even if it just goes back to stay in Scotland, don't travel to other parts of England or Wales or Northern Ireland, or even if there's some restrictions, like more temporary things saying, okay, Dundee's really, really bad, we'll put you into a lockdown for, 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, then, things like that might work. We'd known in the past, particularly in England, that the tier system didn't work necessarily very well because people can move between different areas. I mean, I remember back to last autumn where, Scottish councils were going into sort of, higher levels 3 and then into 4, like Glasgow and West Lothian, and my folks are in Falkirk. They were surrounded by level 4s and they were in 2. So it was just a matter of time that they couldn't go anywhere because they couldn't travel through a 4 area. So they were stuck anyway. So, these kind of tier things don't necessarily work, I think, unless it's targeted testing like we saw in Liverpool. So say Dundee's bad at the moment with the Delta variant, it would make sense to have, a short-term lockdown, people not coming in, coming out, test everybody, find out how bad it actually is, and then, speed up the vaccine rollout like they have been in Glasgow to say, anyone over the age of 18 can come forward and just sort of like essentially firefight, because that's what they're having to do, because it is, they keep saying it's a race between the vaccine and the virus. But, it kind of brings us on quite swiftly to the sort of argument that's built up between Nicola Sturgeon and Andy Burnham over the announcement with Manchester, because the rates in Dundee and in Manchester are quite similar. But, the politics side of things is always going to be quite political and a bit superficial at some point. And, I think it's Andy Burnham, and this is using this as an opportunity to be heard again. And he has done quite well, particularly about the UK government, where Manchester was being overlooked for funding. I think Andy Burnham has positioned himself to be a Labour leader in the future. And we should almost forget that he was part of the new Labour government. But to his credit, he is right in terms of that the Scottish government should have been communicating with, the local authorities if they are choosing to not allow people to travel in that area. But I know that what Ivan McKee was saying was when he was on the Sunday show is that they were communicating with the UK government and it was not being filtered down. So we don't know how difficult was it for the Scottish government to pick up the phone to Manchester local authorities or to Andy Burnham's office and say, this is what we think we're going to have to do.
I think Andy Burnham should be getting annoyed at Boris Johnson, just in general, not even about the lack of, filtering down the communication, if there was any. But I don't doubt there was communication between the Scottish government and Westminster. But why is Andy Burnham not getting on Boris Johnson's back about the Delta variant getting out of hand in the first place? He should be, protecting his citizens and fighting for them, in my opinion. I don't think he should be trying to pick a fight with Nicola Sturgeon? Because what real remit does Holyrood have to directly communicate with, Andy Burnham anyway? Like what formal? Well, I know you could just pick up the phone and say, look, we're going to put you on a red list, which would have been maybe just a nice courtesy, but would that have been any sort of formal legal process? I just think Andy Burnham's picking a fight with the wrong person. But then I always want to pick a fight with the Tories. So,
from my understanding, he is being very critical of the Conservatives' particular policy about India not being put on the red list earlier, so therefore it's taken root in England, and then obviously it started to spread, and it just seems to be in certain areas in and around Manchester, Blackburn, Bolton was, but it's now getting much, much better. So I think that he definitely has been critical of the UK government. But I think what he is definitely trying to position himself as the next leader of the Labour Party, which might not be that far off. But I think that what he's trying to say, and I think he's got a valid point, is where the SNP criticise Westminster and kind of just make decisions and kind of go and implement things without communicating or without justifying. And I think that he's definitely got a point there. And I think in the future that the Scottish Government, if they're going to be doing these types of policies, which I find really strange because they're not really that enforceable. I don't know how you stop people from travelling to Manchester. It's like, do you stand at Glasgow Central and stop people getting on? They've got train tickets to Manchester, Piccadilly, but let them travel elsewhere. I think it's almost unenforceable. So therefore it should be guidelines rather than legislation. I don't know. But I think in the future that perhaps the Scottish Government needs to be picking up the phone and saying, if it's Liverpool City, for example, in the future, or any of these towns, they need to be communicating with them because they can't do the same things that they are critical of other governments of doing.
Yeah, I'm a bit kind of ambivalent to the whole thing. Like, in terms of, all right, sorry, sorry, Andy, you felt it wasn't. It would be respectful for the Scottish Government to give you a phone, but we're not dealing with a pandemic and your feelings are kind of quite far down the list, to be quite honest. Yeah, I take the route. I'll blame the Tories as well then. If the Scottish Government are saying they told Downing Street never bothered to inform their local authorities, then I'm happy to throw all the blame at them. But we know how angry the Scottish Government get when the UK Government makes decisions and doesn't consult them or inform them. So I suppose you can see the Mancunian point of view in that as well.
I think what's important, though, in all of this is that public health comes first before politics. And I just think that there's a bit of politicking coming from all sides, obviously.
And we've actually seen the politics getting in the way of really, really important decisions. I think particularly around the Scotland and England border last August, I think it was, that where before Nicola Sturgeon had even floated the idea of closing the Scotland-England border, it was very much being speculated. I mean, if you remember back to when we were first coming out of lockdown, the UK government was essentially forcing the devolved nations to take a four-nation approach. So we had to all implement the same results, the same outcomes at the same time. So just open up if we had, if England decided to do it or certain parts of England wanted to do it. So, the politicking has had a massive detrimental impact on the public health of individual people that have likely resulted in people dying. And when you've got politics about, the nationalist, and I'm saying this in inverted commas, government in Scotland wanting to close the border to make some kind of point, when actually if we had just gone ahead and done that back in August, then perhaps we would not actually imported a lot of the variants that actually came into Scotland, because there's people that have said, this is scientists that have said, that Scotland actually ridded itself of all the variants it had in the first wave, and the other ones that were imported back in from international travel and from coming over the border from England.
Yeah, and a year and a half into the pandemic, the borders are still wide open. There's still people coming and going, and it's just ludicrous. I know I've said this in the podcast before, but a government that was elected in an obsession with controlling the borders were given the biggest opportunity ever, where even the most left-wing person in the country was saying, I think we should probably shut the borders. And they couldn't do it, either through incompetence or I don't know what else.
They don't have the infrastructure to do it either, realistically. And, because Australia have got the infrastructure to close the borders between their different states and their internal areas and stuff. We don't. Whether that's, something that definitely the country needs to reflect on afterwards, I don't know. But the whether it's just incompetence, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's anything like that. You're right, because this government was, to reduce immigration by X amount over X amount of time, and they can't even do it when, everybody's saying, I really, really think we need to stop people coming to this country for a while because of the public health issues. And they've no bothered their arse.
That swings us back to the Tory corruption, because Priti Patel, Home Office, she got lots and lots and lots and lots of money to secure the borders, make them strong, and she bought infrared eyes goggles for people to stand on the beaches and look out for poor refugees and dinghies.
If you want to give them so they can go and rescue them, I'm all for it. But I don't think that's what.
No, that's not what it was for.
Definitely not.
No,
for that. And I know that Priti Patel actually wanted to close the borders last March or last April, but she was vetoed by Boris Johnson.
She probably wanted to close the borders before then. Let's be honest.
So I was going to say she's probably always wanted to close the borders.
The day after the election. But I think with that in itself, though, if you were the Home Secretary and you had principles and you were not involved in really dodgy dealings in the past by meeting other governments without getting permission, you would have resigned. If you're the Home Secretary and you're saying, this is a global pandemic, we need to close the borders, we need to stop people coming in because it's a public health issue, you would resign and become public and say, this is what I've tried to do, I'm not able to do it, I think this will save lives, I'm not allowed to do it within my role, so I've resigned and I'm going public about it. Then perhaps some people might have had a bit of respect, rather than waiting a year and then doing some kind of interview in the Times.
I don't know what you were saying about the sort of infrastructure in terms of internal borders in the UK, but it's difficult. But the external border, we're an island. We're a fucking island,
And
we could have stopped people coming here. Just shut the airports, shut the ferry ports. Nobody's getting in, apart from possibly the tiny wee amount of refugees that are braving it in dinghies. And if that's the only people getting in, it's statistically insignificant. It's not going to damage the pandemic, or the pandemic response, rather.
There's 12 countries just now that claim they're corona-free. And as it happens, most of them are islands, like the Marshall Islands, Micronesia.
And I think as well, when we look at New Zealand as well, who's obviously generally done extremely well during the pandemic and had much less economic impact too, because they've been able to open up and everyone's been able to go about their day-to-day lives. They're just not able to travel. During the first lockdown, everyone, I was kind of monitoring the sort of discourse on these sort of news things being shared on Facebook, and it's people going, yeah, but they've only got 4.5 million people. They're an island. I was like, well, Scotland is part of an island, and the population's not that much more. So there's not that much of a difference.
Oh. Let's talk about something that will cheer us up a wee bit.
Yeah.
GB News. What a laugh. What a laugh they've been giving us. Before I forget, I want to say to anybody that's listening, you should go and follow at GB News Fails on Twitter, who have been serving us up all the sort of errors and mishaps that are happening. And there's so many of them. Like this Twitter account is just constantly get stuff to put up, and I think we can all be kind and say a new news network is going to have some teething problems, but they just look in absolute shambles. Consistent incorrect graphics and misspelled graphics, including like place names or the wrong place names, terrible production values, with graphics suddenly like appearing in the middle of interviews and errors in their sound quality. Some of the presenters are just embarrassing in terms of they just look like they don't know what they're doing. One of my favourite bits is, I can't remember his second name, it's Simon something. He was a BBC presenter for a long time. He looks absolutely embarrassed and furious with being there. Like, it just looks so, like he's completely regretting his choice to jump ship to GB News, and he looks like he hates his co-presenter, who's in the kind of former category of just looks kind of embarrassing and a bit clueless, and he doesn't look as if he's got much patience for her, basically. What about yourselves? Have you been watching it?
I mean, I've not been tuning in regularly to their... I didn't know it was an actual TV channel, by the way, being broadcast. I thought that was like some sort of online service until I actually seen they have a channel number. And I was quite surprised. I know at Ungagged we like a bit of chaos and a bit of unscripted manicness, but these guys are just, it's like, what's that guy, Partridge?
Alan Partridge,
Alan Partridge, yeah.
the character.
The character, yeah. And it's so hilarious. There's a lot of that sort of vibe going on where they say, okay, are we doing this now? We're doing it now. So, and then it was about a wee guy's Panini album. It's like, this is his treasured Panini album, and the woman doesn't even know what she's talking about. Some of it is beautiful, and the most, like, the way you would maybe look at a terrible travesty like an avalanche falling and say that's quite beautiful as it glistens in the sunshine, but it's totally destructive because they're all crazy right-wing.
I saw they had Sean Ryder on, who dropped an F-bomb in the middle of the interview. And it's like, Channel 4 actually specifically mentioned Sean Ryder in one of their policies to not be allowed on before the watershed because he can't stop swearing. I mean, years ago, it was like TFI Friday, I remember he was on, and he got them into loads of trouble because he literally just kept swearing without realising it. I remember it got to the point, Chris Evans made a joke at it, and he's saying, look, if you can get through this interview without swearing, I'll give you my shoes. And he took his shoes off and put them on the desk and said, they're yours. If you can get through this without swearing, please, Sean, please, we're getting into so much trouble. And he just laughed and went, oh, fuck's sake. Oh, sorry. But they've invited him on his first week running.
Was that with Neil Oliver?
It was, aye. You see the moment in his eyes when he realises what Sean Ryder said. He just sort of looks shocked and a bit appalled. Neil Oliver's probably one of the better presenters they've got. Like, you know, as much as we don't like his politics, he's got TV experience. A lot of the people look as if they've never seen a TV, never mind presented in a TV.
You'll go back to that presenter you're talking about, the stickers, that Panini collection, and one that's actually, is it Michelle Dubray? And she was in The Apprentice. I think she actually won, and she's been on Question Time a few times, right? So her politics are very much I'm not a right winger, but I'm a free thinker, and there's nobody that I could vote for, so I stood for myself as an independent. And then it's always that kind of common sense politics, which is invariably right wing. And she stood for the Brexit Party at the general election in 2019. So of course I'm explaining, I actually had a conversation with one of my pals because I was sending these GB fails, and she, you know, we've just been enjoying them. They're fantastic. They really, really perk me up. They make me laugh. And she was like, oh, it's Michelle Dubray. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, and I told her that she was a Brexit Party candidate. She was like, no way. And I was like, you'll never guess who else was a Brexit Party candidate. Do you know the singer from Bucks Fizz, the blonde one? Not the one that done Blue Peter, the other one.
Not Cheryl Baker.
Not Cheryl Baker, the other one. She was a Brexit Party candidate. So Brexit Party had the singer from Bucks Fizz and now presenter of GB News as the candidates in 2019. So there you go. Fun facts.
I noticed Kirsty Gallagher on it as well, the ex-Sky Sports presenter. I don't know why, but I never really thought of her as being a right winger. But I suppose if she's only talking about golf and football and stuff like that, I suppose you might not realise what somebody's political leanings are. They've
got a section called Free Speech Nation. That laugh, that was an evil laugh there, Brian.
That's one of the fails because they keep putting their graphics up when the guy's trying to speak. It's like he started speaking and it just cut him off and went to the sort of dramatic Free Speech Nation.
Red, white, blue, red, white, blue.
It's just crazy. It's just like, you know, it is like very much like Fox News, but it's true. It's actually really, really true what you were saying, because it is like the glitter and avalanche, because we were talking about the funny things, and I think it's important for us to talk about the light-hearted things after the sort of most serious stuff that's happening. But, you know, these GB News fails are fantastic. Please look them up because they really perk you up. But the dangerousness that comes with it, I mean, you've got people like Dan Wootton basically just lying, you know, and Dan Wootton is not exactly your sort of hardline critical journalist. He's the Sun in talk radio doing about celebrity scoops. So, I mean, I think he's just trying to go proper like hardline Fox News, just being really, really angry all the time.
Yeah.
And
sort of InfoWars, sort of that.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. But it's very much like I've been sending some of the GB News fails to people, and they're like, "Is this actually real?" I was like, "No, it's a real," and it's like because it's so brass eye sometimes. Some of the comments are so brass eye that it just looks like it's like a parody. It's like somebody's made a joke.
Could you imagine like a comedy show deciding they were going to try and parody GB News? How would you do it?
You couldn't.
Like, you just end up copying it,
or just getting clips of YouTube and just sharing them, because ultimately what that GB News fails is doing, because that's the parody. The parody is themselves. But I think that, and I put this out on Twitter last night because I think it's the perfect analogy, that GB News will ultimately fail. I think there's going to be people engaging with it. I think there's people watching it because it's something new. I think there's people watching it because it's just ridiculous and funny. But it will eventually, I think, just burn out. And I think it will be remembered as, do you remember when Samantha Fox done the Brits and it was just a disaster upon disaster upon disaster? That's how it will be remembered. Because at that year at the Brits, like, they got the names wrong of like people that won awards and stuff, and the wrong person was getting up to to be like, no, it's somebody else. So I think that's how GB News is going to be remembered in the future. It's going to be that sort of really funny, ridiculous thing that happened, and it's going to, people. Surely these funders, real wealthy Tory funders, are going to withdraw their money at some point when they realise just how bad this actually is.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they've already sunk quite a lot of money in it, so
a lot.
They might be hesitant to pull out this fast. So, they'll get a bit of time to sort out their sort of production issues and things like that. And
a lot of advertisers pulled out, didn't they?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A lot of them apparently didn't realise they were advertising with GB News until people started furiously tweeting them. Because it was things like the Cooperative,
IKEA.
Like companies that probably wouldn't want to associate themselves with that kind of right-wing brand, even if like IKEA is maybe not quite as good as a sort of friendly image that they've managed to cultivate.
Yeah, I think it's important to, IKEA is definitely not warm and friendly when it comes to its employment relations anyway. I think it was Copperberg was the first one, wasn't it? Because I think it was some GB News supporter, right-winger on Twitter, tagged all these companies saying it's great that you're standing up for free speech, and then Copperberg was like, what? we're advertising on this channel. We didn't know, because obviously what happens is that these companies just go to marketing organizations and they basically just put their adverts out where they think that their readership will be watching. So a lot of places don't actually know where they advertise. Similarly with some online websites and stuff like that the actual company that's got the advertising space doesn't know who's advertising on it. And sometimes it's done through like search words that's in the articles, which can be really, really dodgy if you're talking about articles that are criticising the arms trade, because you can actually end up with arms trade organisations advertising in there because there's links to the words that are being searched. So yeah, it also shows the free market and marketing, just how lax a lot of these things are, and how the organisations themselves don't actually know where they're advertising and who they're advertising to, which is quite interesting in itself. But yeah, loads of them have just basically said, we're going to suspend any advertising for at least 3 months so they can see the quality of the production and what's being covered. So I don't think we'll be seeing IKEA, Copperberg, or any of these organisations advertising there anytime soon. Nivea was another one I remember.
I'm pretty sure the bosses will not be happy and will be sending rockets up the backside of everybody in the sort of organisation. And I imagine they'll maybe be bringing a lot of new people in terms of production staff and things like that, because, I mean, some of it's really basic, like knowing how to spell Sterling.
Sterling, wasn't it?
Sterling.
And was it Wales versus Rome was the game that's at the bottom? It said Wales versus Rome, and it's like...
The entire Empire of Rome they were playing.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I would encourage people, though, to use the Twitter account GB News Fails to see how ridiculous they are rather than actually viewing it, because we don't want to artificially boost the viewership to a kind of far-right sort of news network. And a note of caution as well, people used to laugh about Fox News. I remember years ago, lots of people would watch Fox News for a laugh because the sort of right-wing stuff they come out with just seems so ridiculous. A lot of that stuff's quite mainstream politics now. So there is a danger in that we don't take it seriously and we just kind of write it off, because we would love the budget that GP News has got. Our budget is like £2.50 a week or something like that.
And a ginger bottle.
I don't even think it's as much as that, to be quite honest, now that I'm thinking about it. But I'm sitting in my spare room in my jammies doing this, you know what I mean? I'm not exactly media magnates. But if any of the companies would want to sponsor us rather than GB News, we'd be open to discussing it with them. There was other things that happened this week. The Cabinet Office was ordered to release secret polling about the popularity of the union. This has been a result of a 2-year court battle that Tommy Shepherd, SNP MP, took them to court over. I think they're still sort of dragging their heels about releasing it, but I think the court have told them they need to do it in the next few weeks or they'll be held in contempt. Quite exciting to see what's in this, considering how hard they have fought to keep it all under wraps.
I mean, unless it's their doozy for the independence referendum and they have in fact found a positive case for the union and it's a case of wanting to keep it secret until...
Aye, and maybe they've found the Loch Ness Monster on Bigfoot as well.
I know, I mean, we can kind of guess what it says, can't we?
Brian, any thoughts?
So it's interesting that the Tories have not wanted to release this. It's gone to court, I think it's about 2 or 3 times now. So it has gone through various different appeal processes. And the thing is, MPs have seen it. Okay, so they know what's in there. You know, Tommy Shepherd and all the SNP MPs will have had access to this. So they know what's in there. If the SNP or Tommy Shepherd's been pursuing this, it's obviously in favour of an independent Scotland. Again, we live in Scotland. I don't think we're going to be very surprised. I think it's going to be really, really interesting reading. I think that it would be really good to see a lot of the raw data rather than people are going to pick up and spin this whatever way they want. So, you know, you can go and read the National. You know what the National's going to say. You could go and read, the Daily Mail and the likes of the Express. We know what they're going to be trying to defend from this. You know, and like we've spoken about before, that there's a lot of similarities with views towards politics across the UK, whether it be economic and, very much a sort of centrist position in a lot of different things if you look at the averages throughout. But the big, huge differences is the view of the British state, the Westminster institution, all these types of things. And what this polling data might do is actually just expose all of that and actually undermine the Tories' own arguments. So what they say, in Westminster, that, we love X, Y, and Z. Well, actually, there's polling data that's going to completely undermine that. So I think it would be really, really good to see the data when it comes out. I'm going to be keen to read the raw data itself and really see what it's actually saying about people's views. But we need to remember too that this was data from about, I think, 2017 and 2018. So it will be played down as, it's really, really old data, blah, blah, blah. But that in itself was quite an interesting time. And I think that if we put that in context, the Brexit argument was rampaging. There was the general election where the Tories lost the majority and were propped up by the DUP, all these types of things. So it's a really, really interesting snapshot of Scottish politics. It'll be interesting to see what the attitudes were.
Yeah, and I think that's probably around about the same time when Yes was getting its highest results in the public sort of polling data. So you wonder, is this private data that the government have got, does it show Yes even higher than what public it was? And it might not be at that level now, but it'll certainly give the Yes side a boost to know that they were possibly climbing way above 60%.
Definitely. And I think the news that's kind of broke this morning, which, we don't have a lot of detail on yet, is this idea of allowing Scots from around the UK to vote in any upcoming referendum, which is something to be discussed and to have an open mind about.
I was just going to bring that up. Boris Johnson has urged to let Scots across the United Kingdom vote in the next Scottish independence referendum, which is really quite a big concession because he's saying we're going to have one. So, yes.
Yeah, I never really thought of it that point of view. When I heard it, I just thought, that whole chestnut again. I mean, the unionist side bring that up time and time again, and it's just something that doesn't stand up to any kind of intellectual scrutiny. So what they're saying is, we'll have this referendum. A majority in Scotland could possibly vote to leave the United Kingdom, but they're not allowed because it's tilted by Scottish people that have maybe not lived here for years or decades potentially. And also, how do you work out who gets the vote and who doesn't then?
Exactly.
Is it people? Do you have to be born in Scotland? Even does that what qualifies you, or is it like the football team? Do you qualify through parents and grandparents? Does that get you a vote? Do you need to have a DNA test to see how much how much Scottish blood you've got? Does that qualify you? It's just it just unravels once you put it under any sort of scrutiny. And I think they know that. It's just one of these things that I think they keep raising every now and again, because I think they know it gets certain people annoyed, because there is like people that have left Scotland that support the union, and I think they feel they'll get them sort of motivated. And I don't know if their idea is maybe they'll motivate them to move back in order to vote in the referendum. At the end of the day, a referendum's about Scotland's future. The future is based on the people that live here, whether they were born here or no. And it's not about people who left for a multitude of reasons. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to move down to England or move abroad, that's fine. But you don't get to then decide the future of the nation that you don't live in anymore.
And there's also a questionable aspect about it, is that elections are devolved to the Scottish Parliament, so they should decide who gets to vote in any vote that happens in here. But I understand that it's quite complex if you're saying that there's people that live in England, and how does that work? But it's the Scottish Parliament that votes, because they've obviously said that they want people 16 to 17 to be able to vote in any upcoming referendum, people from the EU, refugees, all of these types of things. And then if the UK government wanted to intervene and say, well, we think these people should be allowed to vote. Well, first of all, practically, how does that work? Do they have to do a postal vote, or are they going to open all the polling stations across England with like 2 or 3 people coming in to vote? It just seems really, really quite bizarre. I don't know logistically how it would work. So if you want to try and include as many people to vote as possible, then perhaps they should apply that same principle to Westminster elections and any referendum that happens in the future across the UK, because the Westminster elections is so exclusionary that people from the EU can't even vote. So I really don't think that we should be taking any lessons about inclusivity of elections from the UK government.
I don't really like any of that chat about a sort of ethnic, I don't want to say nationalism, but that's kind of what they're suggesting, isn't it? Like, if you're born in Scotland and you can vote in this independence referendum, the next one that's coming that they're obviously planning for, which I think is what we should be really emphasising here. That's a concession from Westminster, him even saying that. But it's interesting that some in the AFI, how did they pronounce it? The Action for Independence, Mab. They were talking about a version of this, allowing expats to vote. People who were born in Scotland, went abroad for whatever reason, and they should be able to vote, because they were saying, oh, well, they're going to obviously support independence. But as you say, it's a lot of people who left Scotland support the union still. So it's just, I don't like it. It's icky. Get it to fuck. And we are an inclusive nation, and anybody who lives here, if you're a refugee, you're an immigrant, we want you to vote. 16, 17-year-olds, we want that democracy for the people who live here.
And it's this strange sort of situation that we keep finding ourselves in as well, where the nationalist side are the ones that want to be inclusive and don't want to exclude people based on ethnic lines, but the side that try to portray themselves as the non-nationalist, when in reality they're just a very different type of nationalism. The other ones that are actively want to talk about place of birth, want to talk about bloodlines, and these are the ones that portray themselves internationalists. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah,
it's really, icky is a good word, because it makes me feel really uncomfortable when you bring it down to that. It's like, well, are you going to allow it if it's like, your parents or your grandparents, or no, sorry, you're not allowed to do it. It's only this type of Scot we're looking for. That's just awful and really, uncomfortable. But on just one minor point as well that was in that article, and there's one thing that, if you want to talk about a concession, is that the same article is suggesting that they would want Ruth Davidson, Baroness Davidson, to take a cabinet role for the Constitution and therefore be a figurehead for any pro-union campaign that was to happen. Please let that happen. I think having an unelected Lord at the front of any future pro-union campaign would be a gift. Please.
Oh, no, please
bring it
not.
on.
Just
yes.
I thought she was away.
No.
She's like the Mike Myers of Scottish politics. Just when you think she's gone, suddenly she's back. Can we not be ready?
Oh, I think we should have her ride in on a tank.
Yeah.
Union Jacks, the full shebang. Maybe have some sort of military parade with nuclear warheads leading it. I mean, yes, bring it on. I want it.
I'm like, dare it. because I think that the Tories think that Ruth Davidson's some kind of secret weapon, and we cannot deny the fact that Ruth Davidson is good at taking on Nicola Sturgeon because she can be strong. However, she just talks total nonsense, and she doesn't stand up to any sort of form of real scrutiny. And I think that's a positive thing, but also the fact that she lost all credibility when she chose to accept a peerage. And I think that it would be such a gift and such a positive thing for the pro-independence case to have an unelected baroness standing at that podium opposite whoever will lead a yes, which I'm assuming will be Nicola Sturgeon. I think that would be a gift.
I disagree. I mean, the Scottish Tories have had their best results when they've had her at the front. She clearly resonates with a certain section of the Scottish public. It's certainly no us.
25% voted
and
for
you
her.
say things like she's discredited with the stuff, with becoming accepting a peerage. I think the Scottish people that care about that stuff are the ones that didn't like her anyway. You know, I don't think that's going to hurt her with that sort of Tory base that will make the sort of bedrock of a potential no vote.
I kind of see what you're saying, because she is that likeable Tory, isn't she? She's that relatable Tory.
Yeah, there's an oxymoron.
I know, it sounds weird, doesn't it?
But
also, I just keep thinking of the memery. There's going to be a lot of good memes.
No, there will be, and I totally see where you're coming from, and yeah, okay, they had their best result, but they had a very similar result under Douglas Ross, and he's useless. So I don't think it really matters. There's a voter base there that will vote Tory and that will vote no regardless. But I think that the appeal beyond that is very limited.
No, I mean, you say that as much as Douglas Ross was the official leader, Ruth Davidson was very much sort of at the forefront all through the last Parliament.
She was the one thing at the back.
She was the one at First Minister questions and things like that, and she did play a prominent role in the campaign. So
she was on all his leaflets.
I think the Tories will be hurt when they have to fight a general election as Douglas Ross is the sole sort of frontman without Ruth Davidson. I think you might see a big difference in the results.
I personally think that her being a leader of it would be a positive thing.
You say that she unravels under scrutiny, but the problem is she doesn't get scrutiny for a lot of the Scottish press. She gets such an easy ride.
She does.
She's one of the boys. I would like to know what our listeners think. What do they think about Ruth Davidson? Would she be a good leader for the Unionists?
who would be the best frontman for a no campaign from our perspective? We can maybe put a Twitter poll up about that. That might be quite good.
That's a good one. I just think it would be cracking to see. I'm assuming it's going to be Nicola Sturgeon and Ruth Davidson debating each other, you know, on a sort of Nicola Sturgeon would have her for breakfast, and I think that, you know, being an unelected Lord would be such an easy stick to beat.
What's Alistair Darling doing these days? I would love to pick him back up.
I think he's retired. Who knows?
There was also a by-election down south. It was a shock result in Chesham and Amersham. That's the most English-sounding constituency I've ever heard. Where the Tories, who have held that seat forever, managed to blow like a huge majority and lost to the Lib Dems. Just got to get the numbers here. Yeah, at the last election, which was only in 2019, the Conservative candidate got 55% of the vote and had a majority of like 16,000, and they lost it, and the Lib Dems won it, and they've now got an 8,000 majority. What did you think of that then? Did anybody see that coming?
I didn't even know that this by-election was necessarily happening, because it wasn't really covered so much in the mainstream news, because we know Batley and Spence coming up. We knew what was the other one that was
Hartlepool.
Hartlepool, that was last month, so we knew that these ones were coming. But this one, I was like, oh, we've got a by-election result this morning, and huge majority completely overturned in a by-election, high turnout of 52%. Of course, we can't divorce the fact that it might be local things involved in it too, but yeah. The blue wall was crumbling, according to Ed Davey.
Did you see him with his hammer?
His big orange hammer.
His little orange hammer. Somebody painted that, didn't they?
Some staffer, yeah.
It was just a bit of a shock. I think it was also probably a shock to the Lib Dems, because they were really excited. What a loss, though. Did you say what was the majority? 16,000?
16,000 majority they had in 2019. And at times in that constituency over the years, they've got more than 60% of the vote. You know, like...
Wow.
it's baffling. You just can't understand how.
How did that happen?
There was, when you look at some of the sort of, like the Labour vote in particular, there was definitely tactical voting going on, but in a constituency where the Tories have been getting more than 50%, tactical voting shouldn't have really come into it, because even if every anti-Tory voter voted for the same candidate, they still wouldn't have beat them in most of these elections. It's really quite a baffling, astounding result.
I think we could take into consideration, obviously, it's a by-election, so you sometimes get odd sort of things thrown out of a by-election sometimes. You know, the general election, the turnout was like 74% or 75%, so it was really, really high. So it could be the Tory vote just not turning out, but not to that extent. You know, there's a really, really high win for the Lib Dems there. So and Ed Davies saying it's a shockwave through British politics. I think that's a bit much. I think just calm your jets a wee bit. But I think it's definitely something to watch as we go through into any by-elections that happen in that area going forward, and certainly going into any future general election. It'll be interesting to see blue wall with shoeboxes or plastic bricks or whatever it was does actually crumble.
I think in that regard, the tiny little orange hammer was quite representative.
Yes, it was. That staffer got it spot on. They must have bought some plastic mallet from somewhere, painted it orange, and then got those shoeboxes as the plastic blocks and painted them all blue for that moment. And I watched it in real time on BBC News, and my thought was, I bet those activists are glad they're wearing masks. So their faces are hidden, because that was peak cringe.
You've got to love the Lib Dems, though. They're always good for that kind of cheesy stuff. Like, every time. It's not just Willie Rennie.
It's not.
Willie Rennie would have became a wrecking ball himself and swung through the wall.
And swung in.
He'd have stepped it up.
You'd get a couple of staffers to lift them and use them as a battering ram.
Yeah, exactly. And that would have been it, yeah. That would, in fact, that I would like to see. But that's just an image.
Willie the Hammer Rennie.
Sorry. You made me laugh there at that image. Please, Willie Rennie, if you listen to our podcast, please do that next time. Be the battering ram.
I mean, I wonder if this is like the biggest swing ever in a by-election. I mean, there can't be many that was more extreme than this.
That is huge, isn't it?
16,000. I mean, 2015, when, you know, like Labour lost all these seats to the SNP, and there was some massive swings in those in that election, but I don't remember any quite as big as that one.
I don't know. That's definitely an analysis discussion for next week.
And where does Keir Starmer go again? Like, well, you know, 622 votes for Labour.
He's not even on the pitch on this one at all. And have you noticed that Labour don't want to talk about this? Have you seen anyone being interviewed? And it's very much like, oh, you know, congratulations to the Lib Dems. They put in a really good campaign. It's that sort of patronising thing, and then they move on to whatever it is that they want to talk about. Because for Labour, who is the official opposition, to get, I think, 1.7% of the vote or something tiny like that, that is quite unbelievable. And yes, there's tactical voting. Yes, we know what it's like to live in a constituency that's really, really safe. I mean, when I lived in Watford in 2010, and the choices was Tory and Lib Dem, and I voted Lib Dem, right? So, I did 2010 to get the Tories out. Look how that worked out. Voting Labour at that particular time in Watford was a waste of time, because it was, 15% of the vote. So you can understand why people are making that decision. But to that extent,
I mean, the Greens lost half their vote. Mm-hmm. Again, probably more tactical voting.
Yeah.
Labour lost like 90% of their vote. They went from over 7,000 votes to just over 600. I mean, that must be one of the lowest Labour votes in a Westminster constituency ever. I can't imagine there's been many votes smaller than that. Maybe if we go back to like 100 years ago, and maybe there was like a lot, maybe some smaller constituencies or whatever, you might find some. But it's grim for Keir Starmer.
When's Battling Spen? Is that the Battling Spen's next week, I think, or the week after? Could that be curtains for Keir?
Oh, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, the Labour mantra, or the Labour rights mantra under Corbyn was any other leader would be 20 points clear. So by their own standards, He's fallen somewhat short. Talking about battling spend, did I tell you I get George Galloway challenging me on Facebook?
Oh, did you?
Yeah, there was somebody commented that George Galloway had said he was joining some Irish social club in the constituency, and the guy that ran the club basically said, "I've never seen you here, so I don't know what you're talking about. Try to portray yourself as that you're somehow local." I commented on it as well because I had a while ago some election material through for George Galloway demanding a by-election so that he could run against Margaret Ferrier, and I mentioned that. I says, he's a chancellor, he's down there trying to get elected, but he's also at the same time he's preparing the groundwork to run in another by-election up here, and he came on completely denying that he'd ever done that. That I must have been. He thought I was mixed up. That I was thinking of the Scottish election material, and probably didn't realise that I'm such a nerd that I take pictures of all the leaflets I get. So I was then able to post front and back pictures demanding that Margaret Ferrier stand down so he could run in the by-election. Still waiting for him to get back to me. He's not actually blocked me yet, so
I was just
he's
going to
maybe not
ask.
seen it, but we'll wait and see. George, if you're listening, I'm waiting. Come and tell me I'm wrong.
He is the biggest chancer in the world, and is he standing for that name? Was it Respect or something? Respect.
No,
or something.
that was his.
That was the old
party.
one. The last one. That was when he was for Unity.
Yeah.
Alliance
Respect.
for Unity.
Oh, Alliance.
And it is. He's gone back to being Respect now for his
has he?
for his Yorkshire campaign. So that's the English party.
He's a socialist again, right?
He's a socialist.
He's a socialist when he's in England. He's a Tory sympathiser when he's in Scotland, right? That seems as if he'd maybe have better luck trying it the other way about, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't with George Galloway. I blocked him and I muted the words George Galloway on Twitter as well. So I don't know that George Galloway exists on Twitter. So it's quite a peaceful, happy place.
I'm blocked by him because I probably made a meme of him being a cat or something. But I don't see anything much that he says. Although I still somehow, it gets filtered through and you see screenshots and stuff like that. He is a total chancer, and I've seen that. Are you tweeting him, David? Well done. Well done if you don't get blocked as well.
We'll wait and see. I'll update you next week if there's any developments. Yeah, the other thing that I quite enjoyed from the by-election, did anybody see the losing Tory candidates making his speech?
Oh, the big giant guy.
Yeah, it was first of all, it was such a classless speech. He said he grudgingly congratulated, I think it's Sarah Green was the name of the Lib Dem candidate, and said that he very much looked forward to her fulfilling all the promises she had made.
The shade.
Then said that the results has to be taken into account, that the Lib Dems, not only through the kitchen sink, but through the bath and the pots and pans and all that as well, which is a weird flex to say, it doesn't really count because they tried harder than me.
Yeah.
But, well, maybe you should have tried harder and you would have won it, mate. But yeah, there was that moment as well during it. For some reason, he was standing in front of vending machines.
Yeah.
And it was halfway through the speech, I was thinking, no, that way your eye just knows there's something funny. And I'm looking at it, I thought, he's like a foot taller than the vending machines. I looked up, he's 6'9".
Wow.
That's really tall considering I'm 5'3".
It would have been kind of cool to have a giant in Westminster. The nature of the building, they might not have been able to fit in it properly.
No, it'd be like sitting on an airplane seat when you're really tight, the benches. But another thing, just quickly about that by-election that just came to me, is that Sarah Green is a campaigner against HS2 because it's quite contentious in that particular constituency. So that could have been something that is quite, front and centre. Sarah Green's against it. Lib Dems are for it.
Classic Lib Dems, huh?
Exactly. Amazing.
The only people whose political opinions varies depending on geography.
And if it's before election or after.
Yeah.
And they asked Davy on Andrew Marr if he was going to be the next Prime Minister, and I just had these thoughts in my head of that front page of Joe Swinson, I'll be the next Prime Minister. And I was like, and he's like, that kind of smug face, I'm not going to say that just yet. And I was like, I know exactly what's coming through my door at the next general election.
Let's not mention Joe. We don't want the Polish chapman in the door again.
No.
Right, guys. Well, I think we'll call it time. We've kind of ran over a wee bit there. So thanks a lot, everybody, for listening. If there's anything else that you'd like us to talk about, tweet us at _ungagged, hashtag Holyrood Ungagged, or you can drop us an email at ungaggedleft@gmail.com and just put Holyrood Ungagged in the subject line. Deborah, Brian, thanks for joining us. By the time this goes out, we'll know whether Scotland has qualified for the next round or whether they've hibsed it and blew it, and we'll know if we're heartbroken or in ecstasy. So fingers crossed it's the latter.
Yes, come on, Scotland.
Come on, Scotland.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Catch you later. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.